People of Reddit who work in haunted hotels, what are your stories? You/deleted responded. My brother did house cleaning at an historic in downtown. He would see shapes dart out of the corner of his eye when he looked in mirrors, and the beds would untuck themselves after he'd made crisp corners. Some days he heard footsteps up behind him on the narrow stairs, and his hair stood on end. Add to that his vacuum being constantly unplugged when the cord was completely slack and toilets flushing themselves. When he brought it up with his manager, she said, "Oh, don't mind that. It's happened since I can remember." You/deleted responded. One night I'm sitting in the office, watching Netflix, when the motion detector is triggered in that area. We put them about 5 feet off the ground so raccoons and squirrels don't trigger them. Anyway, policy states that if the detector goes off, I have to go check it out. I head up there, and I could hear someone singing. Not very good singing. So I radio to my boss that we've got, what I thought, a camper exploring in the middle of the night. I approached her and turned on my flashlight, and she immediately starts yelling and running. The boss picks me up in a golf cart and we are driving around trying to find this lady. We even radioed for a few of the other workers to wake up and help us look for her in case something is wrong. The next morning we get a call to come down to one of the yurts in a lower loop a good half-mile away from where we were searching the night before. We get down there, and found this lady. She had crawled under a yurt that some family had been staying in and was banging on the floorboards all night long. They were too terrified to do anything, so they waited until morning. Turns out, she was some tweaker who had found her way into the campground and built herself a little nest a good 100 yards up the hill from where we found her. We found tons of drugs, wallets, car keys, you name it. We figure that she had been living there for about 6 months before we found her based on the amount of, literal, shit we found up there. You/12noodle12 responded. My aunt lives on the Isle of Arran, a small island in Scotland. She used to work in Brodick Castle and everyone who works or has worked there will tell you it's haunted, and you get told all the classics like hearing footsteps and seeing doors slam. One story always stuck out to me about a dog and its owner staying the night. The owner wakes up realizing the dog isn't in the room, so the owner runs out into the hallway to find the dog calming walking down the dark stretch of hallway of the castle, but the dog was looking up at nothing while strolling as if it was side by side with someone and looking up at them. The dog walked all the way down the corridor completely ignoring its owner. Just seeing your dog walk into pitch black with this invisible entity gets me creeped. I've been to that castle myself and it's hella spooky. You/Sneezyol responded. Rental house. My grandparents would rent out a house in the old rundown neighborhood. Sometimes to family but often to people that would just trash it. They always did background checks but the renters would get boyfriends that would come into the picture and cause trouble. So I grew up constantly repairing this old house which everyone agreed was haunted. The most intriguing thing that ever happened to me was a chandelier started swinging above my head, full circles, without any explanation. My grandma always said that whatever existed in that house liked me more than the other people. Worst story about the place was a fire that happened in the kitchen spontaneously at the table. It never spread around the house, just at the table. Sometime later a new renter taunted the ghost, saying it didn't exist, calling it names. He died of a heart attack at the kitchen table on the very spot where the fire happened. You/Kingsam responded. Worked at a historic hotel a few years back. A conference booked a tarot reader for their dining entertainment. The psychic came up to the front desk afterwards and told us how the spirit of the lady of the house still haunts her portrait in the function room, on and on. Yes, okay, bye-bye. The function room was an extension built in the 90s and the portrait on the wall was a random lady from the 1800s that had been bought at auction. Only thing scary about an old hotel at night in the middle of nowhere was the possums trying to break in through the roof, and the building code violations. You/Shisha432234 responded. A hotel I worked at had plenty of activity that was mostly experienced by staff. I only encountered one guest that had experienced something, but after asking me if the place was haunted, and looking very shook up about something too, she walked away without clarifying. Staff routinely dealt with footsteps behind them, things vanishing from carts, objects moving by themselves, sometimes while they watched, voices in empty rooms that stopped when they went in, voices calling out to they when they were alone, splashing in the pool when no one was there, the sound of fingers tapping on the front desk when no guests were around, an unwelcome vibe in the empty ballroom, elevators that moved by themselves, unexplainable noises, shadows in windows in empty rooms, and apparitions. So many apparitions. Whenever we had a new hire, we'd take bets on when their first sighting would be and just who it would be. Would it be the farmer in blue coveralls? The young guy in black jeans and a black button-down shirt? The older lady in the business attire? Fun times. U/Igor 3618 responded. I used to live and work at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, and have tons of stories. If you haven't heard of it, this hotel is where Stephen King stayed and was inspired to write The Shining, but not where the movie was filmed. I was a ghost and history tour guide for the summer, so have a whole list of crazy things that I experienced and stories. A few of the more interesting personal experiences. I was sitting in our dorm and a picture in the hallway fell off the wall and shattered. Doesn't seem weird until I looked at it and it was laying on the ground face up, almost as if someone took it off the wall and slammed it on the ground. My coworker and I were sitting in her room drinking and someone came angrily stomping up the stairs and down the hallway. We were thinking we were busted. Then the person got to her door, turned the knob and opened it, but there was no one there. It was known that there was a creepy brothel owner that liked to haunt the hotel. One time I was giving a tour and talking about this creepy old man, and my hair got tugged and no one was behind me. People on the tour thought I was faking, but I'm a terrible actor. Anyway, those are pretty fun ones. I have a lot more one-offs, like getting crazy pictures with figures in them, smelling Mrs. Stanley's perfume as she walks past, couches moving around, etc. Everything was pretty light-hearted and not too freaky. Great place to visit. U/Tattoo Tanya responded. I worked in a Marriott as a bartender. The restaurant side would close earlier than the bar. It was a giant room and set for next day's breakfast. There was a ceiling-high partition along the middle of the room. My bar was on the other side, along with the patio and pool. There was barely any staff at that time of night, basically myself and the front desk almost a block away. I had to walk through the restaurant to access the kitchen. I usually did fruit prep late when it was slow. So many times I walked through the restaurant and saw an older lady sitting in the same seat by herself. And every time, I would say, "Ooh, here we go, dumb customer sitting in the dark, too stupid to know the restaurant's closed." I would gear up for drama, but then she suddenly wouldn't be there. She didn't scare me. I'll prefer her over some entitled Marriott Rewards member, lol. While I worked there, a cop killed himself in the room. That hotel was known for people checking in and committing suicide. I also worked at another haunted hotel before furlough, same kind of late night alone thing. That one was a guy. And I saw a blonde chick there too. I can tell that story if anyone cares to hear it. U/Paleobear1 responded. Not a hotel but a restaurant. The basement is the most notorious place for occurrences, naturally, and LVE had a few unexplainable things go on as I'm in charge of cleaning the basement as one of my shift duties. One time I was sweeping when I felt the cord to my apron get tugged or loosed somehow. I tie my apron behind my bag and it's not uncommon for co-workers to teasingly untie it as they walk past. But the area I was sweeping had only one entranceway, and I was facing it, so I know that it was impossible for anyone to come up behind me and untie my apron without me noticing them. Another time was when I ran down to the basement to change a beer keg in the walk-in when I spotted something in the corner to my right, the same corner as the other occurrence, mind you. It was out of the corner of my eye, but I swear I saw someone naked squatting in the corner. I did a second glance after I noticed, but there was no one else down there with me. It weirded me out a good bit, but I played it off as me just imagining things. But I still swear I saw it. U/Deleted responded. I do AV in Chicago and had a night gala at the Drake Hotel in the Gold Coast Ballroom where the famous ghost story of the woman who apparently killed herself by jumping to her death happened. Apparently in the Gold Coast was where her husband was caught having sexy time with another woman. Long story short, during setup I'm alone setting up speakers and monitors. I keep having my monitors unplugged from the wall. I think nothing of it the first time it happens or the second time, but after I taped them onto the walls so they wouldn't come undone, right as I'm about to finish setting up my last monitor, all 6 of them come undone from the walls, and LV never been so frightened in my life. I immediately bolted out of the room, eventually came back and did the show, made sure I struck everything as quick as I could before banquets finished so I wouldn't be alone, and bam, went home. I've worked at that property since it happened to me 4 years ago, but LV been sent in with a partner and all has been good. U/Firebirds2468 responded. I volunteer at a local theater and there's a ghost that hangs out there. Roger. We all know him. He's friendly. My experience was one evening, I was the only person there programming the light board for an upcoming show. And to do that, all other lights in the building need to be off. So, I'm up in the light booth, working away, and after a while I notice light bleeding into the space. I go downstairs and see the bistro lights are on. About 50% dimmed. I knew I shut them off. So, I shut off, again. Hour later, same thing. Roger kept screwing with me. I yelled at him to knock it off. I had to get finished so I could go home. It was midnight on a Sunday and had work the next day. The building did get evaluated and certified as a paranormal activity building. Chloe July responded. Not a hotel, but an old prison in England. I visited it when I was around the age of 9 while on vacation. It was now a museum with creepy dolls in the cells who represent the criminals who live and or died there. For example, one was a woman who killed her child by throwing it in a well. It's safe to say, I was creeped out by those dolls. The entire time we were there, I had the feeling that there were more people than the other visitors of the museum. I felt kinda like there was a cold stream of air around, and I had the feeling that someone was staring at me the whole time. I can't really describe it, but I was really scared and uncomfortable. It was like I felt the presence of the spirits of ghosts of the people who had died at this prison. And honestly, the dolls didn't help. I remember writing in my diary about what I felt in there. Years later, when I was around the age of 16, I found that diary and tried to find the prison on Google. Well, my feelings weren't unusual in that place. It has been known as haunted. My parents and I didn't know at the time. But finding out that I felt what I felt, without knowing it was haunted then, was so *king scary and thrilling. I still think about it sometimes and I still get chills. Gborg111 responded. So, this isn't a hotel, but at the movie theater I work at, or used to before COVID-19, has a ghost or to an effect some sort of entity that roams around in 2 of the theaters that we seat people in. We actually identified some of the information about said ghost. Some of my co-workers used a Ouija board after shift was over, and found out the ghost demon whatever it might be, and we were told her name is Layla. She's around 4 to 6 years old, and she likes to mess with us cause she thinks it's funny. Some of the things she does are sit in a very specific chair in both theaters she roams. She sometimes makes us see stuff in the hallways. We see shadows and shapes in the projector room, silhouettes of her, stuff like that. She said she doesn't mind us if I remember correctly. To tell you the truth, I don't really know if this is a ghost or not, but it's definitely there. /fruitglue responded. The hotel where I work is not very old or famous as a haunted hotel, but according to the cleaning staff there is a little girl haunting one of the floors, and they all refuse to clean alone in the rooms where people have died, 1 heart attack, 1 suicide. I work the night shift alone, though, and I haven't seen shit. The only thing I can think of is the front door slamming sometimes, and I don't see anyone going in or out. But our lobby is covered with mirrors, so I probably just got confused and didn't see them. /deleted responded. I used to work not at a hotel, but a very famous old mansion in the Bay Area that was built by an eccentric who put in trick staircases to fool ghosts. I had 2 terrifying experiences there. 1. I was practicing for giving the extended tour of the grounds. The basement was all brick, and like a maze. I was down there practicing that section of the tour when all the lights went out and it was pitch black. I heard the door over the stairwell slam shut as well. I felt my way out using the wall and bolted up the stairs as fast as I could when I found them. Turns out that there was another tour guide giving a legit tour at the time that had exited with her group and turned off the lights. 2. The second thing that freaked me, I used to work not at a hotel, but a very famous old mansion in the Bay Area that was built by an eccentric who put in trick staircases, etc., to fool ghosts. I had 2 a linen room to an interior hallway that I would always be unnerved by. From the first day I got the job to the day I quit, I don't know if I ever felt safe and normal in that hallway. I could literally run a countdown in my head between the moment everything was fine to stepping over that particular threshold and everything was colder and just not right. It still gives me chills a bit to think about it. /WaryTheFreaks responded. Haunted pub, not a haunted hotel. But we had a few. There was a manager who got shot in a bar fight in the 20s who you would see wandering up and down behind the bar every now and then. He was chill. The pub manager lived above the pub and there was apparently a room you just did not go in. There was an old lady in there and she was fucking evil, and apparently no one could stand being in there for more than a few minutes just from the atmosphere. We also used to get a lot of concerned women coming to the bar asking about the little girl in the bathroom on her own and to check on her. She would always stand right by the bathroom entrance. She liked to knock on the bathroom stall doors. She was pretty chill, just mischievous. /Phoenix Justicex responded. One I can actually answer personally. For a time I worked at a local motel that has since been demolished, and it was so known by locals that it was haunted that most people didn't even blink an eye at some of the happenings around. A few years ago someone was murdered at the motel, and from then on it was said that whenever you would go into the room there was a spot in the room, no matter the time of year, whether hot or cold, that would drop in temperature and be much colder than the rest of the room. I was taken into the room one day and could confirm myself it was true. You could feel the temperature in that one particular spot drop. But the big one for me was one I personally experienced while working alone. I worked in laundry, and one day when I was in the middle of folding towels and I happened to see a woman pass by and go in the direction of the small office in our laundry room. It wasn't unusual for people to come in or come by, 'cause guests could come by to ask for extra towels and stuff, so I assumed it was someone who needed something. Went into the office, nobody. And it was a small room. There was a tiny bathroom attached, but no one was in that either. And there was only the one door in and out of the office, but there was nobody there. And the room was filled in such a way that they couldn't have hid either, outside of under the desk that was in there, but I looked and no one was there either. You/bastard_wing responded. As a guest at my sister's wedding many years ago, my dad obligingly put me in the hotel's haunted room. The morning after the ceremony I wake hangover-free, but with a slight ringing in my ears, which isn't that unusual. What is unusual is that the ringing proceeds to get louder and louder, until it starts to make me feel physically sick. Then it just stops and I feel fine. There's any variation of sleep paralysis, infrasound shenanigans that could explain it, but it's weird that LVE never experienced that before or since. Unrelated side note, the town was having a hobby horse festival and town crier contest on the same day, much more viscerally unsettling. You/Kolbfather responded. Not a hotel but a prison I work at currently. Not really haunted but sometimes gives me the heebie-jeebies. Maximum security, and we do 3 patrols during the nights after lockdown. This is the oldest prison still operating in my country. Not the US. Walking through the quiet halls of some empty 50-plus-year-old units, cold concrete, flaking paint, sound of your footsteps reverbing through the building. Lights flicking and strange sounds every now and then. You can hear the wind blowing outside, wailing through the halls. The thoughts of all the misery shared by some restless souls. For some of them this was the final stop in their life. Some have taken their own and some have been taken. Mental illness and suffering throughout almost 100 years. That shit sometimes gives me goosebumps. You/Ladder-Lottington-72 responded. I worked as a caretaker in this big all-hotel. Beautiful place, up in the mountains. I'd been asked to mind it for a couple months during the winter season, so I took my wife and son for the trip of a lifetime. It was easy money and gave me time to finish my book I'd been working on. At first all was swell, but after a few weeks things started getting weird. My kids started seeing stuff like hallway twins and leaks of red stuff out of the elevator. My wife began being clingy and disturbing my writing time. I just wanted to finish my novel and have some fun, but it felt like all I was doing was writing the same stuff over and over. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Leave your own stories down below, I would love to read them. If you would like to see more videos like this, please like and subscribe, it helps me out greatly.